I hear some background noise. If you would please mute yourself, everyone, except our presenters, that would be appreciated. My name is Elaine Giesel. I'm a marine ecologist. I've been a water activist in Sierra Club for 45 years in Texas and Kansas and now in Colorado. I've done water quality monitoring on a small scale and training in the Kansas City area. But we have some real experts here today. Um, Here we go. Here are our presenters, their names, and they're here to share their experiences. I'd like you, out of courtesy, to please observe the following during our webinar. Stay on mute while our speakers are presenting. Save your questions for the Q&A when everyone has presented. We have a lot of material to cover. If we stop for questions in the middle, we will never get to the end of our presentations. If you want to put your questions in the chat as we go along so you don't forget them, you're encouraged to do so, and we will go through and kind of consolidate some questions. We do intend to send out a link to the recording, and we will get PDFs made of the slide decks and have those available too, so we can go through them quickly and you can go later. I'm going to stop sharing my slides now, and we're going to go first to thought I was stopping share. Hold on. I got to stop share here.
Well, I see your face.
Oh, yeah, but I really don't need to be sharing anymore. And I thought I hit the right button. Hang on.
Mila's here.
Okay, good. I'm good. That's great. Okay.
She's one of our speakers.
Yes, Mila has had some local health issues and she's working hard to be with us today. Our first presenter, though, today is Erik Weck. Erik is a retired member of our Water Sentinels core team. As a member of the Valley of the Fox Group Water Sentinels in Illinois, from 2011 to 2018, he participated in gathering water quality samples, performing laboratory sample tests, as well as designing and implementing lab workflow and documentation improvements. He developed an online basic level water quality monitoring course for our team back in 2018 and 2022, and that is actually posted as a resource on our website. And at the top of the chat, you'll find our website. So you can go there and look under resources and you will find that. It's, what do we call it, Erik? Water Monitoring 101. And it's
Indeed.
available also in Spanish, by the way. He had it translated into Spanish. So, Erik, I'm going to let you share your screen, let you get started.
Great. Thanks, Elaine. In 2011, I began attending meetings of the Sierra Club's Valley of the Fox River Group, part of the Illinois Council, and I quickly became a member. The group's territory extends 38 miles along the river from the town of Algonquin in the north to Oswego in the south. Through meeting attendance and engagement with the group, I was recruited to participate in the group's Water Sentinels water quality monitoring program. The Sentinels took quarterly samples from 20 sites on 11 tributaries on the Fox. A well-established group with strong leaders, a volunteer professional chemist, and a cadre of dedicated citizen scientists, the Valley of the Fox Water Sentinels had 12 years of continuous sampling, testing, data interpretation, and summarization and reporting experience. The group submitted their data via the Illinois chapter for communication with state and local authorities, as well as municipal water treatment facilities. A local high school, Illinois Math and Science Academy in Aurora, allowed the Sentinels to use weekend lab time for quarterly sample analysis. Through hands-on participation with experienced Sentinels in the field, I was trained on monitoring considerations and processes, including site visit safety precautions, sample collection equipment and procedures, site data gathering approach, and sample integrity maintenance. I participated in lab testing efforts. The immersive experience, coupled with personal training in industrial field safety monitoring techniques, helped me develop a deep understanding of the process. By late 2012, I volunteered to become the monitoring coordinator responsible for scheduling the quarterly monitoring efforts through communication with Sentinels, assuring lab availability at the academy, as well as confirming volunteer staffing of the lab. By introducing a leading number to the sample container labels, we cut sample testing throughput time nearly in half. With the lab staff led by chemist Ron Bedard, we documented lab testing protocol and procedures. By 2018, the Fox River Study Group, which annually brings together stakeholders from community organization, environmental groups, and water treatment plants along the Fox, made sample testing by the Valley of the Fox redundant, what with automated testing along the river. The Valley of the Fox group continues to educate the community on water quality concerns. Water Sentinels began as a National Sierra Club program in 2001, led by Scott Dye, its core mission being to protect, improve, and restore waters of the U.S. while creating outdoor opportunities for youth across the country. The Legacy National Water Sentinels made funds available to chapters and groups for promoting a framework for engaging the community in outdoor activities along waterways. Fishing rods were procured and made available to groups for distribution to children. Safe outings focused on river cleanup days and other water-related outings were promoted. Groups, through their local Water Sentinels programs, began water quality monitoring in earnest. The Sierra Club relied on professionally trained staff and volunteer scientists to anchor local Water Sentinels water quality data collection, analysis, and submission efforts. Under the guidance of the chemistry and ecology professionals, Water Sentinels verifiable test data have held industry and government entities to account, resulting in monetary penalty judgments, public journalism exposure, and policy changes. Nationally comprehensive water quality monitoring training was made available in Alabama for Water Sentinels teams. Before 2012, when Sierra Club national funding for the effort was withdrawn, the program had been budgeted at $1 million annually. In the absence of program funding, several Water Sentinels teams continued their sampling and testing efforts, often through the Sierra Club grant process. Rios Bravos in New Mexico has been a great example. Water Sentinels volunteers of all stripes continue to engage in water quality advocacy, where chapter and group Water Sentinels teams no longer collect and test samples. Watershed protection and water treatment facility operations garner some of this focus. As is seen on the slide, the current Water Sentinels have a much broader focus than primarily water quality and accessibility. Affordability, equitable access to water, defending water sources, water states, concerns, etc., are all motivating factors for the Sentinels as presently constituted. As a member of the National Water Sentinels team between 2018 and 2022, I was the point person for the National Water Sentinels water quality monitoring effort. Part of my role was to develop an inventory of active Sierra Club Water Sentinels teams across the nation. This slide shows an incomplete list of historic Water Sentinels teams. You'll note that one of the most active teams, Rios Bravos, is not accurately captured. In trying to nail down current active Sentinels groups, I interrogated several Sierra Club databases, including Tioga, the Heritage Sierra Club Grassroots Network pages, Water Sentinels discussion listserv, etc. The task was a bit like a scavenger hunt at times where no clues were available. My opinion is that active water quality monitoring Sentinel groups have their heads down, focusing on their local issues, gathering funding as they may through Sierra Club grants or local benefactors, and partnering with like-minded allies. There are several organizations which maintain funded water quality monitoring programs. The Isaac Walton League, which has done monitoring since 1969, is one of them. Through engagement with local consortia of like-minded water advocates, sufficient pressure to change can be brought to bear on industry governments. The repeal of a Utah Lakes law in 2024 was a major victory for the local Sierra Club water quality advocates and allies. Finding and engaging with allied organizations is a tactic short of initiating a water quality monitoring effort where funding is not immediately available to a group or chapter. In general, I feel that I failed in bringing together existing Water Sentinel teams under a cohesive Sierra Club Water Sentinels water quality monitoring umbrella. During the same 2018 to 2022 time period, while shamelessly appropriating the excellent work done by Sierra Club members, Kurt Cunningham and others, I developed a basic level water quality monitoring instruction manual titled Water Quality Monitoring 101. The materials are written and arranged such that, in my estimation, an interested high school or middle school student might be able to interact with them and develop an understanding of water quality monitoring concepts and do some rudimentary testing. My source material were those of Sierra Club members, various state level documents, college level citizen monitoring approaches, and other water information documents available on the web. I relied on my experience with the Valley of the Fox Water Sentinels for the various data collection forms and sample site planning documents. During 2020 to 2021, through a Sierra Club grant, the training documents were translated into Spanish. In 2021, a scholastically adept Edison, New Jersey high school student, Jason Zhang, agreed to engage with the online water quality monitoring training documentation, ostensibly as a water quality monitoring proof of concept. For the equivalent cost of about $250 at the time, through part of the grant, the National Water Sentinels provided rudimentary water sampling and testing equipment along with the training materials. Jason used the equipment, ran tests, and was generally supportive of the approach. Sierra Club member Gloria Charland's Manitou Creek Watershed Alliance participating in using the materials as well. She was generally supportive, but her organization is well advanced beyond this intro level of water quality monitoring. The National Water Sentinels leadership team did not consider it cost-effective to shepherd this sort of effort more broadly based on the cost of the equipment and about 1 year shelf life of the testing reagents. For interested groups, this training material could be an inexpensive way to introduce individuals to the construct of water quality monitoring. That's all I have today, and I do appreciate your attention.
Thank you, Eric. And as I mentioned, that particular resource is available on our website, the Water Sentinels website, under Resources tab. Take a look at it. We will save questions to the end, and I want to introduce next Mila Marshall. Has she been made a co-host, Debbie?
No, I
We
will right now.
Now we
I was
need to-
listening to Eric.
All right, thank you. Well, Mila came on a little late. She had another appointment, so we're going to make her a co-host so she can share her slides while I introduce her. And she is a doctor, a PhD. Dr. Marshall is an ecologist and clean water advocate for the Sierra Club Illinois chapter, where she mobilizes diverse networks across Illinois on clean water issues spanning wastewater, agriculture, and industry. She's got it all. She supports the organization of volunteers and data collection and water sentinels across Illinois to protect clean water, connecting scientific and legislative communities at the city, county, and state levels to address decades of water infrastructure disinvestment. And Mila is a staff member there in Chicago, correct, Mila?
Yes.
And you may have the mic.
Can you all see my slides?
No,
Yes,
there.
now?
Okay. I'm sorry. For some reason, it did something weird. So I'm going to start over. Let me stop share and let me share again. I apologize. Here. All right. Slideshow. Sometimes I have to talk myself through it. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm always very inspired by people who use their Saturdays to learn about helping protect clean water. I'm currently on the campus of Benedictine University and have some other activities that I need to do today. So I'm constantly moving around, talking about all things environmental justice as well as water related. So very happy to be here. I do want to credit the rest of my team, which I'll introduce and recognize our lead volunteer, Sandy Loftus. I'm not sure if she's on the call, but she has been a godsend. We cannot do this work without volunteers. We are a very small chapter, but so appreciative of those who have supported us through the years. And so I do want to start off just by level setting. My job is to help you all understand how these Water Sentinel teams can be set up. And let me just check the chat box. Oh, Sandy is the best. I want to make sure everybody can hear me. For those who are unfamiliar with the Sierra Club and how it is that we operate, we have chapter staff that's at the state level here in Illinois. We have 14 different groups that make up our group geography. Some of those groups have water teams, some of them do not. The advocacy work in the state looks like the energy of the people who show up. So those water teams do everything from volunteering on projects supporting clean water for all locally, at the county level, and the state level. Then there are water sentinels. Water sentinels specifically is what we're talking about, but very unique group of volunteers that are charged with collecting information and also translating and communicating that information to various stakeholders. And then there are water coalitions. And so Water Sentinels sits uniquely inside of our Clean Water for All program. We could not advocate for clean water without accurate information across the state on various parameters of surface water, groundwater, drinking water, wastewater, and agricultural water. All right, I just want to start fuzzy picture of my boss, Jack. But I love this quote. We use this at our first Water Sentinel convening. The combination of citizen science and advocacy has delivered big advances in Illinois water quality in the decades. Sierra Club volunteers have been doing this. And so we know that we cannot move this campaign forward in the state without our volunteers collecting data. And so for those that are familiar with citizen science and community collected data, that's what we do, but we train people, we partner with institutions, organizations, and work at multiple levels in order to ensure our skill sets are appropriate for the various parameters that we are testing, that people are literate on water quality issues, whether that's with the Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act, so that the testing and the monitoring is in alignment with the needs of protecting water. And so the Water Sentinel team is small. Kristen Burgeon is not on here, so shout out to Kristen and the Rock Island folks. Sandy Loftus is our lead volunteer. Brian Thompson, really integral in our echo tracking for pollution permits. And I do want to pair that there is active like water monitoring, and then there is pollution permit tracking that we have paired in order to protect clean water. They are both equally important. None is greater than the other. We work collectively to advance clean water. And so that powerful combination, sampling tells you what's wrong, permit tracking tells you who's responsible. And so this is just a bit of a outline for understanding the type of water monitoring that can happen. And I do want to acknowledge, I feel like with the Sierra Club, I have 22,000 aunts and uncles. We have brilliant people who are volunteering that have been doing this for years, that have come from federal government or come from consulting. They know what they're doing. However, people have their preferences. So I do not want to lose the reality that because this is a volunteer-led initiative, that providing people with the opportunities that are in alignment with their abilities and mobility is really important. So water monitoring and sampling, getting out in the field requires certain movements and capacities, whereas permit tracking for those people who may find mobility and getting outside a little bit less accessible gives people an opportunity to protect water inside and outside. So we monitor across the state, we meaning Sierra Club volunteers and members. This is a slide that shows when we did our Water Sentinel open house, we wanted to collect information on what people were doing, where they were doing it, who they were talking to, and who they were partnering with. This is important because if we want to galvanize the resources, the tools, the skills across the state, you cannot engage or activate, mindlessly. And so we collected this information, one, so we could do a better job at articulating what we're doing here at the state level, as well as to share resources across those various Water Sentinel groups. And if I have time, I'll present some of that information of what we've collected to inspire you to think about as you develop your programs, what are some considerations that you should keep top of mind. I also want to say that our sampling program has grown in terms of I don't want to say notoriety because I don't want to kind of steal any, I don't want to misrepresent, but Sierra Club's name carries some authority with it. And some people have their different feelings about who we are as a club. But when people realize that our citizen scientists, our water sentinels, one, have been doing this for decades, two, are connected to various resources like EPA third-party labs and subject matter experts and academia, that changes the value of our presence in certain projects. Last year, we were invited by Equity Legal Services and Centerville Citizens for Change to participate in their drinking water monitoring program, in which we collected and supported collecting 118 water samples that resulted in positive tests for coliform and drinking water with E. coli in it. This hit the press 2 weeks ago. Feel free to Google Cahokia Heights and E. coli. You will see all of the stories pop up. That I want to say we were invited. People who know what we do and understand the ethics of how we operate as a Sierra Club, whether that is leading with the I can never say it. Jimenez principles is really important because when people are in crisis, they don't want to train us how to talk to them. They want to trust that we understand how to come into a community, how to share our resources, how to not suck the air out of the room. We continue to support this project. We are still looking for volunteers. It is a time commitment. And so sometimes when you're creating these programs and water issues arise, we're looking for commitments of people who can say, yes, I can donate 2 hours for 6 months for the next, year or whatever that is. So you want to be mindful as you set up certain programs or partnerships that you do not overpromise and underdeliver. I cannot say that more than enough. People will ask us for things that we have the heart to do. We have the will. We do not have the capacity because we don't have the people or the timing or the funding. And so we have to be clear on what we can provide so that we can continue to retain that trust between communities who are suffering from water issues. I do want to call out that the private drinking water company in the comments, they were saying like the informal comments, informal data, they reject. I laugh at that because the data that Water Sentinels have collected across the nation has been used to inform litigation, policies, as well as inform public health parameters. How am I doing on time, Elaine?
Yeah, you got another 10 minutes easily.
Okay, wonderful. I also want to say that it's very important that our water sentinels are literally the glue between connecting the people with the data. Water sentinels create the information that tells the stories. That information turns into conversations with public media. And so it gives us an opportunity to build relationships with local journalists. We know that water literacy is low. The types of data that's collected, the bodies of water that people are working on allow for narratives to exist over a longer period of time. Not everybody cares about water for the same reason. And so what we're doing at the chapter, what groups are doing, clean water teams, and what's happening at the federal level, things can just feel like really, really stirred up. And so when we have information on our bodies of water, we have data that can kind of show a different narrative than what private entities have collected. It becomes available for the public to consume. And so It is so important that Sentinels exist, but also that that information is translated in unique ways to serve the needs of public education. Monitoring plus pollution permit tracking lead to clean water for all. There are times in which the information that we collect or what we do can seem like that's not where we belong. For example, during the Illinois prison water crisis, which is still going on, it is a national crisis that people who are incarcerated and detained at prisons and jails have access to some of the lowest quality water, poorest infrastructure, and facilities that are actively violating the Clean Water Act and Safe Drinking Water Act. When Sierra Club stepped into the chat, we did not, we didn't move out of our lane. People were really concerned. What do you have to say about, prison water? Well, we helped the coalition understand echo violation. We introduced what NIPID's National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permits were, and helped those who were advocating for the people align themselves with the information that supported poor infrastructure, violation of the Clean Water Act, and we worked in parallel. And so I am very proud that we understand our value in a room, and we're able to dissolve those tensions of we don't care about people, or we only care about the environment. Pollution tracking, permit tracking, and monitoring allows for us to provide information so that we can support clean water for humans as well as for nature. And then also, without pollution permit tracking, Sierra Club Illinois chapter, along with Friends of the Chicago River, would have never identified that Trump Towers was violating the Clean Water Act and causing thermal pollution in the Chicago River. And so that settlement, while it took 8 years, and my predecessor, Cindy Screwcrude, if you know her, she, also amazing woman and professional, along with environmental lawyer Albert Ettinger, initiated this lawsuit. And so what we know as Sierrans is that lobbying and litigating works, but without accurate information and holding people accountable, coupled with legislative literacy, we are leaving money on the table and leaving people to engage low quality water. I have to also say that in order for Sentinels to make sense at all of the levels, partnering with sub-teams, engaging at the chapter level, and ensuring that you have group leads buy-in is so very important. This work does not happen in a linear pathway. It happens, very dynamically. And so last year was our first experience partnering with the HAB sub-team, Doris and Gloria, Lois Novak, in putting together a experience specifically on monitoring and sampling on harmful algal blooms and how that moved through the state of Illinois. Also showed the types of partnerships that are needed, considering our state has had funding cut specifically that supports monitoring. And when our state agencies do not have the resources to collect information, we have to fill in the gaps. This is an example of what that looked like. On the right-hand side of the slide, you will see various organizations from nonprofits like Current to professionals like Dan Firth that focused on PFAS, as well as Illinois Beaver Alliance and folks from Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. The way that Water Sentinels learn is from everyone. There is no one course or class. We realize that we have to constantly bring people together to cover our bases, whether that is understanding legislation, understanding changes at the state level and opportunities for people to engage and share their data, where information is located, reporting, tracking, and monitoring, and all of those things. And so that was an example of like, all right, how do we create a curriculum for Water Sentinels to learn? And so I definitely want to introduce you to that understanding. And then our cultural institutions are waiting for experiences that they can say, we support clean water too, and they want to provide their members an opportunity to engage low cost. And so we received a grant from Sierra, from National. Shout out to Gloria for championing that and moving that for us for Doris and Lois. And we were able to partner with the Peggy Notabart Nature Museum, the Lincoln Memorial Garden and Nature Center, and Nahant Marsh across the state to provide in-person training coupled with the online training. Again, constantly thinking about accessibility. The average age of a Sierra Club member and volunteer is over 50. And so we want to make sure that there's something for everybody and all abilities. I am very proud of what we accomplished. We're doing it again this year for water affordability with Debbie and Gloria, and very excited for what that's going to look like. So Elaine said, how do you keep people for decades? Well, we keep staff for decades. I am the second person to hold this position. Cindy Screwhood had this position for 20 years. And so when you have staff that's committed, those relationships are valuable and we work together. I can't see leaving Sierra Club anytime soon. And I'm so inspired that Christine has been here for 20 years. And so our volunteers, our staff members, and our relationships are long-lived. We are not just, staff members. We are neighbors, in Illinois. And I do want to lift up that we work together constantly. And even when people leave positions or move around the state, they will find opportunities to continue to engage. I also want to lift up the importance of academic relationships for monitoring and literacy. Again, the way that resources flow through Sierra Club, it could be sub-team grants, it could be a philanthropy that comes in with a mission or a focus. There could be a new campaign that is being rolled out. But what never changes is the flow of talent through our state universities and city colleges. These are just some of the academic institutions that we've had relationships with and built relationships with, whether it's Augustana College providing a place for us to have our workshops, working collaboratively with the freshwater lab and identifying opportunities for interns, doing teach-ins at Loyola and introducing opportunities for water monitoring for projects, whether that's a master's or a environmental studies, working with professors at University of Illinois to roll out a community lab so that people can get access to free, low-cost, third-party, high-quality data, or partnering with Chicago State University, introducing Sierra Club opportunities to geography students in terms of what can you do with your skill set and how you can make it applicable to the needs of conservation, specifically for water present day. So I'll stop there because am I at time, Elaine?
Pretty much so, and we'll see what kind of questions we get on this. I really like your touching on the funding, the linkage with the academics, and how to sustain a team. Those are really huge issues, and we'll make sure your recording is available on your slides as well. Our
Thanks.
our next speaker is going to tell us even into some detail what kind of water quality monitoring she's been doing. This is Jennifer Martin McLeod, and she has been a Water Sentinels program manager, a staff person for the Grand Canyon, Arizona chapter of the Sierra Club for over 10 years. And there's that longevity point, by the way, someone who's been there a while. She oversees community science, water quality, and flow monitoring, as well as riparian restoration projects and policy analysis. Jennifer, we're going to hand it over to you to share your screen.
Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yeah.
And everyone can hear me okay because you answered. So I will just jump right in. That was a great presentation, Mila. Thank you for sharing all of that. That was awesome. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm glad to see there's so much interest in starting programs like this around the country. As Elaine said, my name is Jennifer Martin McLeod, and I manage the Water Sentinels program for the Sierra Club's Grand Canyon chapter, which is the Arizona chapter. I'm going to walk you through how our program works, what we've learned, and what you would need to think about if you want to build something like this in your own community. Like Mila, I talk about our work a lot to a lot of different audiences that need to understand different aspects, and so I really geared this talk as trying to walk you through how you would begin something like this in your community. And you're going to hear a lot of common threads between my presentation and Mila's, which I think is great, and that will be really helpful to any of you who are really thinking about getting something like this started. let's see, I pushed the space bar and it didn't advance. So I'm not sure why.
Try the down arrow.
Okay, there we go. The mouse seemed to work. Thanks. So first, just looking at our, and I should have said Arizona Water Sentinels objectives, because while we're very consistent with the national, probably everything's not an exact mirror image. So the Arizona Water Sentinels objectives are twofold. One, to achieve on-the-ground conservation objectives like community science, water quality monitoring, riparian restoration programs, and that kind of thing. And two, to connect people with their local watersheds. People won't work to protect what they aren't familiar with. So by building relationships between people and nature and building community around special places, we create the conditions for collective action to protect rivers. And real quick on this slide, I'll just point out all the photos that you'll see throughout this presentation are our volunteers doing the work that I'm describing. And I hope that that really illustrates, that it's not all just about hard science. It's about passion. It's about fun. It's about community. And I think that really shows through when you see the people doing the work. So our water quality monitoring objectives, let me get into the specifics of what we're trying to accomplish with our monitoring, because your funders and your volunteers will ask you this. We're trying to identify changes and trends in water quality over time in some of the most ecologically important, most special watersheds in the state. We want to know, is this river getting healthier or is it degrading? Are conditions different in different areas? What leads to better or worse outcomes for our rivers? So we're generating credible data that can be used to determine whether water bodies are meeting Arizona's surface water quality standards. And we focus on those kind of regulatory mechanisms because that's what's going to be able to be actionable. And then that can contribute to Clean Water Act assessments, which is the federal reporting mechanism that determines which waters are impaired and which are healthy. And as I said already, we're connecting people with their local watersheds. A volunteer who has stood in a river and collected samples is a person who will fight for that river. Never underestimate the power of that direct experience. So these are the rivers that we're primarily working on at this time. We do different things around the state. I'm really focusing on the water quality monitoring specifically right now. And so at this time, we're doing that on two rivers. The Verde is one of the largest perennial streams in Arizona and thus very ecologically significant. And the San Pedro holds a really unusual distinction. It's regarded by some as the last major free-flowing undammed river in the American Southwest. And because it crosses the Mexican border, it's a very important neotropical migratory bird migratory corridor as well. So on both rivers, we conduct monthly water quality monitoring during the warmer months. We do cleanups and we do community outreach and education. And then on the Verde, we also conduct year-round flow monitoring. And I also want to mention quickly that this year we're initiating a new monitoring program on the Agua Fria River in central Arizona. And we're actively planning that right now. So I'm drawing on some of what I share with you today in real time because I'm starting up another program right now. So this is a very current conversation for me. It's not just retrospective in terms of the work we've done in the past. I'll talk for just a minute about the water quality parameters that we're measuring. This is a typical basic suite of water quality data. It's the kind of parameter package you'd expect a community monitoring program to collect. Dissolved oxygen tells us how much oxygen is available for aquatic life. Cold water holds more oxygen than warm water, so you expect natural seasonal variation. But when levels crash, it often signals excess nutrients like phosphorus, causing algal blooms that consume oxygen. Conductivity measures how well the water conducts electricity, which tells us about dissolved salts and minerals. Pure water has very low conductivity. So when conductivity spikes, it can signal pollution from agricultural runoff, urban stormwater, or industrial discharge. And then the other parameters that we're routinely gathering data on are pH, which measures acidity and alkalinity. Most aquatic life thrives in a fairly narrow pH range, and pollution, including agricultural runoff and stormwater from construction sites, can push pH outside of that range. And then we look at TDS, or total dissolved solids. That captures everything dissolved in the water: minerals, salts, metals, pollutants. And like with pH, the organisms in that water have evolved to tolerate a specific range. Too high, and you start losing biodiversity. We work closely with our state environmental agency to make sure that none of the data we collect is purely academic. It all has real management applications. And I regularly meet with DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality staff, to identify data gaps and figure out whether and how we can fill those gaps. Here you see the handheld multi-parameter meters our volunteers use in the field. These are instruments that would have been, something that you would only be able to do in a laboratory a generation ago, but now they're accessible, durable, affordable, and designed both for field conditions and for user friendliness for programs just like ours that aren't necessarily always entirely professionals doing them. Equipment is one of the major program costs, and it requires ongoing maintenance, calibration, eventually replacement. So this really needs to be factored into your budget. But if you're thinking about setting up a program like this, I would also encourage you to talk with your local environmental quality agency, your local state agency, very early in thinking all of this through. Because I know, for example, here in Arizona, smaller teams than mine. There are some small watershed groups that just work in one local area and might just be 2 or 3 people. And our DEQ, I'm just going to go DEQ from here on out and assume that you all know that means Department of Environmental Quality. Our state DEQ actually has loaner equipment because we have a more robust program, and we'll sometimes have 4 or 5 teams in the field concurrently. And the stuff they're using is way more high tech. It's like $5,000 for the probes they use. They don't have those on hand to lend to us. So these here through that you see on the screen right now, through all of our research setting up our program, were the most user friendly for lay people, the most affordable, and still scientifically credible. But if you're starting a smaller program, there may be an opportunity for you to eliminate this cost by getting loaner equipment from your state DEQ. If you did go with something like that, what you're looking at here, this Hanna combo meter costs around $275 each, and it can last for several years. Those are a really durable item, so those have not been a terrible cost for us. Whereas the white one on the left, that's the DO pen that measures dissolved oxygen. It's been a greater expense. It costs around $350 each. Like I said, we sometimes have 4 or 5 teams in the field at a time. And that one, unfortunately, only reliably lasts about a season. The membrane in that thing is just not the same level of durability. And then calibration, you calibrate every time you go out in the field, so you know when you need to replace an instrument because it won't be calibrating properly anymore. But that's just a cost that you'll need to think through or see if you can even eliminate by working with your state DEQ. These are the data sheets that we use. Your state or federal agency, whoever you're partnering with on this, which would probably be your state agency, will probably have a standardized data sheet that you'll use, but they're not the same with all states. This is something that the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality put together. And because we were one of the most active, one of the first to be engaged in this kind of work here in Arizona, we actually worked very closely with them to help them develop a sheet that would be very usable, again, by lay people and not just by professionals. The data sheet that was used before was very sort of spreadsheet heavy, and it was something that's probably very comfortable for professional scientists, but less so for the volunteers. So we actually worked closely with the state to help them develop this. Your state probably already has something that you would use that's standardized, but just to be aware of that it's not set in stone. And so as you work on your program, if your volunteers are routinely like missing parameters they should have been because the sheet wasn't intuitive or whatever, you can communicate with your state agency about that and you can work with them to develop a standardized data sheet that works well for volunteers. And I would encourage you to think about that and feel free to do that. Regarding data management, when I started this program, I started working for this program 11 years ago. Sierra Club's been doing it since '06. All the data had to be compiled in Excel spreadsheets and submitted to DEQ annually. That process was technically demanding. It was labor intensive. There were not a lot of volunteers who necessarily even had the understanding of how to work with that system. And so again, that's something that we communicated with DEQ about, and they developed a very user-friendly web-based portal. And so after each monitoring day, I go in and enter all the field data from the data sheets directly into an extremely user-friendly portal. It's intuitive, it's fast, it's been a huge improvement. So again, just reiterating, communicate with your state agency about when you're doing a program like this, what's working well and what could work better. And they will probably be very happy to work with you on that. And so if you want to start a program like this, you'll want to find out through communicating with your state agency what the data submission infrastructure looks like and design your workflow around it. And as you move forward over your first few seasons, see how it's working for you and communicate with them if it could use some improvement. This is our monitoring schedule. We monitor in the warmest months, May through October. We're here in Arizona, and those warmer months are when the E. coli spikes are going to be happening, and also when Arizona's monsoon rains bring a lot of contaminants into the river. Earlier in the evolution of our program, we were actually doing it year round, and the cooler months data were so static. There was little rainfall, the water was cooler without E. coli spikes, there was not a lot of precipitation bringing contaminants into these waters, and after a few years of just utterly static data, there was a budgetary decision made to really focus on the half of the year when we were identifying exceedances. And when I say exceedances, I mean times when the data that we gathered exceeded the water quality standards that the state have established. We do a training each April in each community watershed where we work before the season begins. The monitoring days take about 2 or 3 hours in the field. And we end every season with a celebratory volunteer appreciation kind of event, a lunch, and sometimes a little field trip to somewhere fun. And it's also an opportunity to discuss lessons learned over the field season, what worked well, what didn't, and to plan for the next season. And I'll just quickly walk you through what a monitoring day for these volunteers looks like. The logistics are really important for anyone designing a program. And so this process of me coordinating these various teams actually starts around the end of the previous year. I'll sit down with our volunteer leaders and the Department of Environmental Quality staff that I work with to process our E. coli samples, and identify 7 dates for the coming season that work for everyone, the April training, and then the 6 different monitoring dates. And then I'll put those dates up on the Sierra Club calendar, on Meetup, into the formal sampling plans that I have to submit to DEQ each year for approval. That plan contains the dates, the protocols, the site locations, the equipment we use, safety plan, names of staff and certified volunteer leaders, all of that stuff. And then a word about the volunteer leaders. Like I said, we sometimes have 4 or 5 teams in the field concurrently. I can only lead one. And so as a lot of you who work are either Sierra Club staff or have been working closely with Sierra Club for a long time, you know that, the outings leader, to be an outings leader, you have to go through Sierra Club's Outdoor Leader Training 101. You have to get CPR and first aid certified. And then to be one of my leaders, I also deliver a water quality monitoring training for them. And so trying to develop people who've been volunteering into that leadership role is something I'm constantly working on, because I want to have more trained leaders than I really need, so that if someone gets sick or injured one month, it doesn't mean everything grinds to a halt. So then any given month when we're having one of these work days, about a week or 10 days before the date, I reach out to everyone who's RSVP'd through Meetup or on the website, and also to the regular volunteers who, don't always remember to RSVP. I get a head count, I assign teams, and I honor preferences. If someone wants to work with a friend or has a strong preference for a particular site, I do my best to accommodate that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk more deeply about volunteer coordination. Then the night before each sampling day, I calibrate all the equipment against buffer solutions of known value. This is all recorded on the data sheet and is part of the credible data requirements. And then on the day itself, everyone will meet at a rendezvous location. I distribute supplies like the calibrated equipment, data sheets and pens, sample bottles and rubber gloves, ice chest with ice, waders if needed at that site, Sharpies to label the bottles, everything the team would need. I distribute to the different team leaders at a rendezvous point. Everyone disperses to their sites. At each site, ideally, you would like 3 people working together. You can do it with 2. And then if you have, 4 or 5 or 6, some people can do a trash cleanup. Some people can take fun photos. Some people can help with, observations of conditions at that time and those kinds of things. But the ideal number to me is 3 just to get the job done. So 2 will wade into the wet river and stand shoulder to shoulder facing upstream so that neither person is sampling water that's coming off their own body or their partner's. 1 will take the instrument readings and call them out. The person on shore repeats them back and gets confirmation that they heard correctly before writing it down. And then the E. coli sample will be collected last since it needs to go on ice immediately. We have jars that we get from DEQ to do that in. And then meanwhile, the person on shore will be taking notes of field observations, trash, evidence of livestock or domestic animals, signs of flooding, wildlife. All of that context matters when you're interpreting the results later. And so teams cover 2 to 4 sites per day, and then everyone returns to the rendezvous. I collect all the equipment and samples. I will do a post check of the equipment after each session by taking the equipment and reading those buffer solutions of known value to ensure that they're reading them correctly. And then again, I document that on the data sheet. This is all part of the quality control. And then hand everything off to the lab within the 8-hour E. coli hold time window. So just, for those of you on the call who are thinking about starting this, just to really understand what's a workday look like, what's it look like for the volunteers, if you're coordinating what it's going to look like for you, I hope that gave you kind of a snapshot of how it works. If you are wanting to set something up like that in your community, let's talk for a minute about site selection. There are numerous factors to consider in site selection. You need legal public access. You cannot send volunteers onto private land without permission. And securing that permission for private land becomes its own project. So prioritize sites on public land and with established legal public access. The hike to the river needs to be manageable for you and your volunteer base. Many of our volunteers are retirees. And too many sites that require a strenuous scramble to reach the bank or a very difficult entry into the river is not going to be realistic for a community science program. So think carefully about the hike to the river from wherever you can park. Think about the bank conditions and if there's going to be an easy way to get into the river in that spot or not. You can do E. coli with a pole, but it's much more difficult with the probe measurements, so it's ideal to actually be able to have a spot where you can get into the river. It's also good to have close proximity to a USGS flow gauge because then you can correlate that water quality data with stream flow data, and it becomes a lot more meaningful and interpretable. High E. coli at high flow tells a very different story from high E. coli at low flow. You'll want to work with your agency to understand how they define reaches, which is the unit of river management that you'll be working within. A reach is not a set number of river miles. It's a section of river that the agency has determined is similar in terms of geology, hydrology, vegetation, other characteristics that they look at. And so they typically, for their management purposes and their regulatory purposes, they're not going to need multiple samples the same month within the same reach. So you'll want to work with them to place your sites in different reaches, maximizing the geographic value of your monitoring network and also avoiding duplicate data that they might already have. Within a reach, you'll want to pick a spot that is representative of typical conditions for that reach. For example, you wouldn't want to pick a spot that's an unusually deep and stagnant pool. That could give you inflated E. coli numbers, it could give you artificially low dissolved oxygen numbers, and it wouldn't tell you anything useful about the reach as a whole. So when you're choosing your site, you want to pick something that is representative of that area generally. We sometimes shift a site a couple hundred meters up or downstream over time if erosion or other changes have made a location no longer representative of the reach or more difficult to access than it used to be. But the goal is consistency. We're doing trend monitoring, and we want to be able to observe change over time at the same location as much as possible. And then the last thing I'll mention on this is that every route you plan has got to account for that 8-hour E. coli hold time. So 8 hours from the moment of the first sample is collected to the moment it reaches the lab. And that means you have to account for drive time to and from sites, hike time in and out from wherever you park for each site. And then I budget about 20 minutes per site for myself or for experienced volunteers to do the data and sample collection and record all the conditions at the site and stuff. But it's going to take longer if you have newer people that need more teaching and more explanation of the hows and whys of what's going on. So you're going to want to map your routes, time them, and then add a little buffer to make sure that, because if you get to the lab outside of that whole time, it's like, wow, that was a lot of work to have the samples go in the trash because they won't be credible at that point. And right now, as we initiate our Agua Fria River program, I'm working through every one of these considerations. So I'm walking through it in my day-to-day at this very moment. And it involves some team building to figure it out. I'm bringing together DEQ staff to find out what the data gaps are, identify where the reach boundaries are, and I'm working with local residents. These are sometimes in very rural areas. And it's the local folks who know the river really well, know the dirt roads in and out, know the trails, where the public access is, where there are bridges that might have USGS gauges. That's in like really remote areas. You're going to be relying on local knowledge of the folks who live out there. And then also working very closely with the volunteers who are going to be helping to lead these teams to say, hey, is this hike reasonable for you, and those kinds of questions as I'm planning these sites. So what are the data used for? That's a really important question. Because as I said earlier, none of this is just academic. This all has real management implications. And so the primary recipient of our data, as I've touched on many times, is our State Department of Environmental Quality. It also flows to the EPA from there, where it contributes to national water quality assessments. And so when community science data inform regulatory decisions like that, they must meet the strictest credibility standards. ADEQ uses our data to develop an accurate picture of what waters are impaired, which are healthy. That flows up to Clean Water Act assessments, and that will trigger restoration activities, updated discharge permit limitations, and all kinds of regulatory actions. And then they also use it to inform flow regime determinations that will determine whether something is considered a water of the United States under federal law. And that is a huge subject on its own, so I'm not going to dive into that for people who don't know already. That would be an hour presentation in itself. But I'll just tell you that it has enormous implications for regulatory protections. And in some cases, our data has alerted DEQ and other agencies to acute contamination events that needed and received immediate attention. And I guess the last thing I want to mention about this from our perspective, I mean, ADEQ and your state environmental quality agencies as well are mandated to do things like issue discharge permits, demonstrate Clean Water Act compliance. they're mandated by law to do these things, and so they're going to do them with whatever data they have available, however scant, however old. They're going to perform the functions that they're required by law to perform. But our agency, at least, I don't know about your states, but here in Arizona, our agency is chronically, woefully underfunded for the scale of this mandate. And so we advocate for greater funding for that agency every year when the budgets are being pulled together to fulfill those mandates. But at the same time, we're working to fill those data gaps so the agency has good information to work off of when it makes decisions that are going to impact our rivers.
Jennifer, I hate to interrupt. Can you wind up so we have some room for Gloria to speak too?
Okay, like just stop now or chat
How many
another
more
minute?
slides you have?
They are quick, and I will just run through them really quickly.
All right, thank you.
So I'll just kind of breeze through these. This wasn't something I was going to read or have you read anyway. This is just kind of an example of the kind of wrap up that I would share with volunteers as well as our funders following any season so that they can see what we've learned, what management actions may have come from the data that we've collected, and that kind of thing. I'll just run right through these and not even talk about them since we're running short on time. But I was just going to point out that we do some restoration activities, trail maintenance, invasive species removal. So if you want to get a water team together, you can broaden it beyond just the monitoring. And actually, a lot of these other river cleanups and things that feel very accessible to people, because sometimes people feel intimidated by community science because they think they don't know enough or something, but people are very willing to come to river cleanups. So I've found that doing these kind of activities that most everyone feels more competent to do will actually feed into the monitoring because it creates that connection and that relationship with them where I can encourage them to get engaged in some of these things that they might have felt intimidated to become part of. We do legislative and policy analysis as well. The only thing that I'll point out about that is that because of all of this work that we're doing over time, a robust community science program will develop an authoritative policy voice. And Mila already talked a good bit about that, so I just won't go into it more. The last thing I would like to focus just a bit on, because I think it's so important for anyone who does want to set up a program like this, is the volunteer coordination aspect. A lot of times people wanting to initiate a program like this get very focused on the sciencey side, which I've been talking about up to this point, but much of your work is really going to revolve around the people. So you have to ask yourself some important questions. Who are my volunteers? Why do they volunteer? How can I retain their engagement? And then also who's missing and how do I reach them? Can I seek opportunities to partner with schools and homeschool groups? Maybe something I wouldn't have thought of, like 12-step groups or faith communities where service and outdoor activity are already valued. How do I get these people at the table? And then you really need to think about why volunteers do this work and make sure that you're delivering that to them so that they will remain engaged long term. I have volunteers in this program who've been doing it for decades, and that means they can operate self-sufficiently. My constant need for volunteer recruitment is less because these people remain engaged. They can teach others. They develop fantastic institutional knowledge. And so volunteer retention is really something that you want to work on and think about. And to do that, you have to think about why are they here and how do I deliver that? I did have a bit more to say about it, but I'll just continue on and feel free to reach out to me if you would like to hear more thoughts on that subject. The last thing I'll touch on is how we fund this work. And bottom line, I am primarily funded by our chapter budget, just as part of our unrestricted C3 funds. I do some legislative work, which I mentioned, and we use a C4 fund for that. But most of my work is just coming from chapter fundraising. I have been able to obtain some local foundation grants. There's a $2,000 grant I get regularly. There's a $25,000 grant I've gotten occasionally. We do house parties, benefit concerts. That's a little more modest. And then a lot of volunteers actually become donors. I've sometimes gotten as much as a $5,000 donation from a volunteer. I have a lot of volunteers who regularly do $25 donations. So once people become engaged in the program, they often become committed to helping to fund it. And then the last thing I'll say on that is that cost saving measures, sometimes, finding ways to not spend money is just as good as finding money to spend. And so, for example, our E. coli sample analysis, that used to cost, 30 or $50 a pop. And now I'm working with Department of Environmental Quality staff in their off hours, just as volunteers, are now processing all of our E. coli using the uh, DEQ labs during the off hours. So you can, and so that eliminated a pretty significant budget item for us just by setting up that with some state agency employees. And so there are a lot of ways that you can find to reduce the expenditures as well. And that was all I have. And I guess questions will be at the end. There's my email right there. So if you want to follow up with me about any more thoughts or insights about starting something like this, I would be quite happy to help in any way I can.
That is awesome, Jennifer. And you did cover a lot of ground. For those who are attending and are new to this type of program, don't be overwhelmed. You don't start at the top. They've been doing this for 10, 20 years, and that's where they are now. I did invite Gloria Charland to speak to us too. We have a lot of Illinois people on this call, but that's okay. They're doing fantastic work up there. Gloria has worked on a very specific area of water quality monitoring, and I thought this would give you a good example of how she's achieved that. She's the chairperson of the Sierra Club's toxics team sub-team that's called the Harmful Algal Blooms sub-team, the HABs. She works as a paid consultant identifying cyanobacteria in the Great Lakes region and volunteers for her local lake and with the Sierra Club. And she was trained by one of the top algal ecologists in the nation, Dr. Ann Saint. Is it Armand or Amand?
Amand.
Amand. Good. Gloria, let's see what you're doing with harmful algal blooms.
All right. Thanks for having me. I just want to say, can everybody see my slides?
Yeah.
Yay.
Looks good.
So spring is here and the harmful algal blooms team is ready for things to start blooming. That was my opening joke. Anyway, Gloria Charland here. Oh dear. All right, my slides are not progressing. Oh, there we go. All right. Before we start, I'm going to be discussing cyanobacteria, harmful algal blooms in fresh water. These are often called blue-green algae, harmful algal blooms, or HABs, cyanobacteria, harmful algal blooms, or cyanoHABs. Also, cyanobacteria, harmful algal mats, or cyanohams, which is my favorite. Now, why aren't I progressing? I go down here. All right, I got it. So, 3.5 billion years ago, cyanobacteria were the only life forms on Earth. This is supposed to be a picture of the primordial soup at that time. After some evolution, cyanobacteria learned how to take electrons from water, photosynthesize, and create a byproduct called oxygen. Without cyanobacteria, we would not have an atmosphere. They are still simple, ancient, one-celled creatures with no nuclei nor many other cell structures. They do have chlorophyll A and produce their own food through photosynthesis like plants. They are in fresh water and salt water. They're in hot springs and under ice pack. They are in the soil and they are on desert rocks. They are part of healthy ecosystems and they are not always toxic. So, what causes harmful algal blooms? As I have already said, cyanobacteria are everywhere and are part of healthy ecosystems. What causes a harmful algal bloom is the overproduction of cyanobacteria due to fertilization by high amounts of phosphorus and nitrogen. This nutrient pollution comes from agricultural runoff, septic systems, wastewater treatment plants, and urban stormwater. Blooms are further encouraged by global warming. The waters are warmer, and they are warm for a longer season than before global warming. Global warming also causes more flooding, which washes large amounts of runoff into the system, and drought events, which concentrate the nutrients in the water. So why do we care? Never let your dog swim in something like this. Cyanobacteria blooms can produce toxins that kill pets, livestock, waterfowl, and humans. The biomass of a bloom can tank oxygen levels and cause fish kills. Our drinking water facilities need to test and treat for toxicity, taste, and odor. And harmful algal blooms are everywhere. India, Africa, Europe, Australia. In fact, 70% of the freshwater bodies in the US are eutrophic or over-fertilized and capable of producing a toxic algal bloom. So we need to know what we're looking for in order to avoid them, right? A good rule of thumb is when in doubt, stay out. But here's a little more to go on. An algal bloom is loosely defined as a visible color change in the water. Usually they are green or blue-green, but they can even be pink or brown. With algae on the surface or in the water column, there will be poor visibility or increased turbidity, and there is often a foul odor, which can be described as musty, grassy, or even like an open sewer. Here's some photos of cyanobacteria blooms to help you with visual clues. As you can see, they can be blue, blue-green, pink, yellow, brown, even yellowish. And while many HABs can run through your gloved fingers like green water, there are mat-forming cyanobacteria that form these smelly mats that you can pick up with a pitchfork. Okay, so now you have something in your lake that visually you are fairly sure is a cyanobacteria bloom. What if you're not certain? You can still do a toxin test. If your sample has a cyanotoxin, well, then you can be sure it's cyanobacteria and that your community needs to be warned. When taking a sample, wear a face mask because toxins can be in the air, and gloves because there are dermatotoxins that affect the skin. The device we're using in these photos is called a swing sampler. Yes, you can collect a sample without one, but a swing sampler makes the process easier and safer. These often come with telescoping poles so you can collect a sample 12 or 18 feet away from where you're standing. Dip your collecting jar about a foot deep into the water. This is called a grab sample. I do see researchers with photographs of themselves in waders standing in this stuff, and no, you do not want to put yourself into any position where you might be falling into a harmful algal bloom. Note, if you have a mat-forming cyanobacteria, the sample is collected by breaking off a piece of the mat. The HABS team also trains volunteers to identify cyanobacteria to the genus level using microscopes. It's not as hard as you would think, as each water body will usually only have a handful of species that bloom again year after year. In our citizen scientist group of the HABS team, volunteers can post photos to get help with identification. So let's talk very briefly about toxins. There are hepatotoxins that affect the liver, neurotoxins that affect the nervous system, dermatotoxins, the skin, excitotoxins that are connected with ALS, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's, and irritant toxins, which cause gastrointestinal upsets, eye infections, skin and allergic reactions. What do we have here? So on this chart, on the left side, we have a list of some of the common cyanobacteria genus, and the rest of the chart are the types of toxins. So here's the hepatotoxins, microcystins, nodularins, cylindrospermopsin, the neurotoxins, the anatoxins, and the saxitoxins, and the dermatotoxins. all of these toxins have hundreds of different variants. It's not quite this simple, but this is a good chart. For example, so Dolichospermum is capable of producing microcystins, nodularins, anatoxins, and saxitoxins. Aphanizomenon can produce microcystins, cylindrospermopsin, anatoxins, and saxitoxins, excuse me. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but what I want you to note on this chart is that the most common toxins produced by cyanobacteria are the microcystins. And the most accessible field tests we have are for microcystin. My training with Dr. Amand was that you test for microcystins first. If your sample is positive for microcystin, then you can test for other toxins. Here's two popular field test kits for microcystin. We recommend the one on the right, the 5 strands test for price and simplicity. The gold standard test will let you know if your sample is higher than 8 parts per billion, which is toxic to human adults. The 5 strands test only lets you know that microcystin is present. Depending on your location, there is often a county or state agency that can run more precise tests and give you the actual amount of microcystin in your sample. Note, while the toxin threshold is 8 parts per billion, your sample can be much more toxic than that. My lake, Long Lake here in Illinois, has had readings of over 100,000 parts per billion. Now what? So now you know your lake has a cyanobacteria. Oh, this is my office here and an intern from last year. So now you know your lake has a cyanobacteria bloom and that the bloom tests positive for microcystin. Now you need to warn your community. I send an email to all of the lake owners. You can do what works best for you. Social media, posting signage, but we got to get those kids out of the water. Then notify your local agencies. Hopefully bring in your sample for further analysis. Let your elected officials know in a nice way. They need to know that their constituents are encountering dangerous toxins in their lakes. The US EPA has a system to collect your data and probably your state environmental agency as well. And then contact me. I can sign you up to join our citizen scientist group. You can sign up to join our listserv and get weekly updates on informative webinars and articles. You're very welcome to come to the HABS teams meetings. We meet third Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern. If you've got a harmful algal bloom situation on your lake, we'd love to help train you. And that's it. And I guess we're going into questions now.
Yeah, we have a few minutes still in our 90-minute span here to take some questions. Ken Newbecker, one of our core team members, is going to be looking through the chat and maybe consolidate some questions. I think if you have specific issues that you want to talk about with individuals, you may want to contact them directly. Mila Marshall had to drop off. She had another meeting, but her staff address, like Jennifer's, is mila.marshall at sierraclub.org. You can find her there. I did want to mention funding is obviously an issue, and I thank Jennifer for touching on the funding. At the top of the chat, if you'll scroll all the way up to the top, you will find the Sierra Club Water Sentinels website, which the link is there. You can copy what's in the chat, but there's also, as Jennifer said, there are organizations that can help fund this kind of work since we don't have funding right now in Sierra Club for a major project. Isaac Walton League I think you mentioned Trouts Unlimited. Rotary Club very often will do environmental grants. Sometimes it's your local stormwater management program has 319 funds they're called for stormwater management, and they can allow some testing. But the Sierra Club does have a couple of grant programs there. Those links are shown at the top of the chat. One is a grassroots network program, which goes up to $12,000 if you can come up with a good plan. They require a serious proposal. There's some mini grants currently available. First come, first serve that the Outdoors Group is putting on. They're only for $500 unless you're partnering with another organization. The link is there. All the details are there. And I'm not going to take more time right now. Ken, can you unmute? Have you found any questions in the chat that you would like to
Elaine, could
speak
I
to?
add that there's
Well,
a deadline for the Grassroots Network grant? Could you tell people what the deadline is for that, the time frame?
The deadline is April 30th, and it's actually, yeah, it's there. If you'll go to that link, April 30th is the date to submit. And these are very complex. Well, they're not complex, but they're detailed proposals.
Yeah, and people are
And
saying in chat that the links are not there.
When,
uh
yeah, the links don't show up, Elaine, if you come on late. So if you could
oh,
post,
okay. Let me see if I can recopy these and put them back in. In the meantime, Ken, why don't you see what you can do?
okay. The only real questions I saw, the other Elaine Packard had a couple of questions, one for Mila and then for Jennifer. And Mila's is gone, so I guess we don't know how many staffers she has.
Jennifer is still on. Yeah.
But Jennifer is.
yeah,
Yeah.
Jennifer's just went way fast over the word meet up, didn't you, Jennifer?
Yeah, that's not my question though.
Yeah, that's another question. Elaine, why don't you just go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, I know that some chapters have staff time, and Jennifer, I believe, and she'll explain this, is a full-time staff because she's doing an incredible job. And so I think if you need help in your chapter, you may want to see if there's staff that can help you. So that's the essence. And I believe that Mila is a full-time staff as well. So I think a lot of your chapters don't have staff help, but this is something to see if you can get within your chapter.
Yeah, Mila and I are full-time staff, and that is rare on water work. And so if there are folks on who are thinking about starting something like this up, I think what I would encourage is, what I was describing is a pretty big, pretty robust program, and it would be very difficult, I think, for anyone to take on a volunteer basis. But if you as a volunteer are saying, hey, I've got a couple of friends in my local watershed, and we just want to go to one or two sites and try to care for our local river, it does not have to be the robust level of program I described. And I don't even think that the price tag would be very high because most of the highest price tag on the work I do is my staff time. So as just an individual who wants to pull together a couple buddies and help the local river, I'd say your starting point is reach out to your community science program within your state Department of Environmental Quality agency. They certainly have a community science program, and you might not even need that much in the way of funds. They might be, as I said earlier, they might be able to lend you equipment. They might be able to process your samples. So if you want to start a modest program with a couple of buddies in your local watershed, reach out to your state agency. It's quite possibly doable without any funds.
Yeah, and also, the other related question is if you don't want to have as robust a program, I believe on our webpage that Erik put together, it's a lower, level of water quality testing. If somebody could speak to that.
Yeah, that was a question Elaine had mainly aimed at Jennifer.
What I shared that we're gathering is the pretty basic suite. So I wouldn't say that the specific parameters we're measuring is not what I would describe as terribly robust. I think the geographic scope and the number of spots that we're hitting and how often we go to them and the way we weave them into policy actions, that's what I would describe as robust and maybe a bit much for a person to take on a volunteer basis. But in terms of the suite of parameters we're measuring, that's the pretty basic suite. but that's also what I think it's entirely possible that your state agency could help set you up with. Or if you use the same equipment that I use, you're looking at $600 to start up and maybe a couple $300 a year to maintain. So not terrible for a single team. It's expensive, or it's expensive for us because we have many teams.
Yeah.
But for you yourself to do it wouldn't be too bad.
Yeah, just to conclude, this is good information if they are applying for a grant. How much, what range are they looking at? And maybe come to one of you for help on how to get to start.
Yeah, and Jennifer, along those lines, I was wondering, um, does your sampling, if it's not, extraordinarily robust, does it still have indicators in it that might throw up flags that say, "Hey, we need to take a closer look at this"?
Absolutely. Like I talked about a little bit in the talk, kind of the basic suite of parameters that a startup would be looking at would be like the dissolved oxygen, pH, water temperature, total dissolved solids, conductivity, and maybe an E. coli sample. If you want to get into nutrients and heavy metals, that's important data to have. That gets more expensive, and I would not necessarily consider that part of the basic suite that like everybody does. What I just rattled off is kind of the basic suite that everybody does. And it's kind of like canary in the coal mine kind of information. And so, yes, if you're pinging regular exceedances on anything I just said, that's something that's going to need to be looked at much closer, which might get more expensive. But the thing is, your state is going to have standards for everything I just listed. So if you're pinging exceedances of those standards, your state is going to have to start looking into why. And so that's not all going to be on you. And so, yeah, that basic suite of parameters is very valuable.
Let me interject here too that Stephen Brown had to leave the call, but Stephen Brown is also with the Toxics team, the grassroots network, and he is particularly involved in PFAS testing. So depending where you are and what your water has experienced, there are different tests. One thing I would add as an environmental educator is that, especially with high schools and so on, that the macroinvertebrates can be very exciting for young people. It's fairly easily trained. There are charts out there. You can get a kick net and get people out in the water, and it's fun and it's interesting. So that's another thing, to look at. Any other questions, Ken?
Not that I see. If I'm missing somebody, raise your hand.
Yeah, and we are getting
But
close to our designated time. I just want to say if you want to stay on, I have no problem with that, but I do want to respect people's time. And
Not a
if
lot
you
of
need to,
people know what meet up means. Jennifer?
Yeah, I'm happy to
yeah,
touch on that. That's just one recruitment tool that I used. So meetup.com is just kind of like a community building website where people can just look up events happening in their area. And so a lot of some Sierra Club chapters use it, some don't. My chapter actually doesn't use it a ton, but I do because I have so many kind of like social on the ground activities that I run. And I do get, especially for river cleanups, less so for the sciencey stuff, but for river cleanups that I hold, I get a ton of people using that meetup.com website. And then the only other thing I'll throw out before this Zoom ends is that if you feel there was information that would have been helpful for you to start up your own program, in addition to sharing the slides with Elaine that can be sent out to all the RSVPs for this, I also had written out a kind of talking points for each slide. I didn't necessarily stick to it 100%, so it won't jibe completely with the recording. But if you want to be able to look through deeper content on each slide beyond what was in the slide itself, I'll share that Word document with Elaine to go out with my slides, and that'll have a lot of info for you.
okay. Something that we've got up here in the mountains in Colorado, and I'm sure you've got similar situations in Arizona and maybe Gloria in Illinois. Um, our main concerns, our main pollutions in the mountains anyway, are from acid mine drainage, heavy metals. We've got thousands, literally thousands of old abandoned mines and adits that are seeping into the streams. There's also now with global warming, the alpine permafrost is thawing, And in heavy metal concentration areas, it can occur naturally. We've got a problem with that on Lincoln Creek up above Aspen, and it's naturally occurring. And people are going, well, this is something we can't just shuttle off to a treatment plant and take care of, like they do with some of the other Superfund sites from the mines. But we also have, in the high country here, increasing nutrient pollution. That hasn't been much of a problem. It's great for fishing because the bugs like it, and some of the best fishing on the rivers is down below the wastewater effluent outfalls. But now we're starting to see increasing and earlier blooms of this long filamentous algae that's it's a neon green on the bottoms of the rivers. And the White River, which has no industry but is, lots of ranches and hayfields on it, is particularly hard hit. And I don't know if, the Colorado Parks and Wildlife have looked at it. I don't know how much the CDPHE, the Department of Public Health and Environment, have looked at it, but it's starting to show up more and more in the headwaters of the Colorado and the Roaring Fork, as well as up on the White River and the Yampa. And I don't know if that's something we should become overly concerned about or not. Other than that, it'll deplete the dissolved oxygen, which affects everything.
It dies.
Yes, so the green filamentous algae, of course, is not a cyanobacteria, but it certainly can disrupt an ecosystem, either by having so much of it that it shades the water body and no sunlight can get down to the native plants below, and also when the algae decides to die and rot, and it causes the dissolved oxygen to tank.
Yeah.
If there are
So
no more, go ahead, Ken.
I don't see any other
Okay.
questions in the chat beyond that.
All right. Well, I appreciate all of you coming, particularly our presenters who took time to create slides and talk to us about their efforts. It's encouraging to hear how much they're doing out there. For those of you who are looking to create a team, I suggest you may want to reach out to them with specific questions, but think about starting lower in terms of creating a team. Get your folks together, decide what it is you want to do, where you want to do it, how much time you have to commit to it, see how much funding you might need. Erik Weck's resource that is available on our website can help you find materials for under $200. A lot of these are paper strip tests that at least get you started. You don't have to have the nice electronic sensors, but boy, are they nice to have. So I urge you to stay in touch. You can reach out to the Water Sentinels. We'll try to connect you with folks who might be able to answer your questions if we can't help you directly.
Yeah.
And enjoy the rest of your day or spring. And happy Water Day tomorrow, World Water Day.
Yep.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Jennifer.
Elaine.
Thank you, Gloria, Erik. Thank you. And to Mila, and who had to get off the call. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, everyone.
Debbie,
Yeah,
I just wanted to say, can we save the chat? I tried to copy, but all it would copy was the bottom-most entry.
yeah.
Does
Some
that get
people
saved
know,
with the?
some people know how to do that. I don't. I
Well,
wrote down names. I mean, that's
Okay.
why Christopher Miller, he's talked about stuff. Gabriel Milich, she just said there isn't expectation that we're just at the beginning of a series of whatever. Thank you very much for your work. We need much help getting folks interested.
And that's true, and that's one of the tough ones. I mean, I've created teams. I have some experience. I'm trying to. I thought there was a way to do the whole chat.
There is.
And there's three little dots at the bottom that allow you to copy just the chat piece above. And that's what I was trying to
Yeah,
avoid.
the
I
three
want
little
the whole
dots that,
thing.
whoa,
Let's see.
what does it say? Copy. It just says copy.
I know, but it only copies the last entry on mine. Maybe it's
Okay.
just me. It should, on the recording. I think you can get the chat too.
How
Okay.
to, copy would be the wrong word, but I'm going to say chat.
Save
And
the chat.
save the chat. How to save the chat.
It has all the people who signed up, and that's, would like to save it.
The participant list is different than chat.
Yes. Yes.
Oh God, AI is looking up for me. Enable auto saving. Go to Zoom settings. God. And enable the option to automatically save in meeting chats.
Okay, so before you kill the Zoom, you might go open another window.
Okay.
We can stop recording if you haven't.
Oh, shoot.
I think it's been stopped. I don't see it
If,
going anymore.
are you sure you want to stop recording to the cloud?